ain't scared of it, but them pros ain't. Soon as I hit the club, look at the moon face. Hit the pedal once, make the floor shake. Sway inside, my engine roaring. It's the big boy, you know what I paid for it. And
what's the Scooby-Doo? We're coming after you. You're gonna solve that mystery. I see you, Scooby-Doo. The trail is back to you. What's the Scooby-Doo? What's the Scooby-Doo? We're gonna follow you. You're gonna solve that mystery. We see you, Scooby-Doo. We're coming after you. What's the Scooby-Doo? Don't look back. You may find another clue. Scooby snacks will be waiting here for you. What's the Scooby-Doo? We're coming after you. You're gonna solve.
All right, we've got the CFF 2026 Wide Receiver Rankings Summit. We're going live right now. It's Felix Sharp, Chris Battistill, and Jared Palmgren for CampusToCanton.com. We are having fun this week for Campus to Canton Week. Today we've got the Wide Receiver Ranking Summit. Tomorrow we've got running backs. Tuesday we've got quarterbacks. And then Wednesday we will have a mock draft for both CFF and C2C formats, closing it out on Thursday, the day of the NFL draft, with a best ball draft. We're just having a lot of fun. If you want to join Campus to Canton, this is actually a ridiculous deal. Celebrating Campus to Canton Week, you can get in for a year for $1 at our walk-on tier, $2 at the scholarship tier, and then our NIL tier at $3. People in the chat, please let us know if that's a good value. If you have a subscription to CampusToCanton.com, where we are basically giving away the content because you know what? We want to see college fantasy football grow, and I'm joined by two gentlemen, Jared and Chris, who are integral in that endeavor. Gentlemen, we're talking about the wide receiver position here tonight. How does the 2026 receiver pool in CFF compare to previous seasons? Chris, let me start with you first. And Chris, you're muted. Let me unmute.
Of course,
you.
Rookie mistake right off the bat here. But I appreciate you having me. This is gonna be. I'm excited for this episode. The 2026 receiver pool for me, at least this year, I feel like my wide receiver buckets are a little bit deeper. Not necessarily the position as a whole, but I feel like my tiered buckets just have more to choose from because of how close some of these guys are ranked. We have the top end guys that have every right to be up at that top end. Jeremiah Smith, Easton Messer, Malachi Toney, Bo Sparks, Wyatt Young. But behind them, it's a large grouping after large grouping of players that currently feel like they will have the same type of projected production on the season. Where in years past, I felt like, at least for me, those buckets were a little bit tighter. Those tiers were a little bit tighter. They're a little bit more spaced out. Even at the top end, I felt as though the top end options were a bit more predictable than they are right now. At least there was a bigger group of them. And that may ultimately explain why the buckets behind the top end wide receivers this year just may seem like the pool is a little bit larger. So for me, that's where it compares to differently from other seasons.
Jared, you have the confidence meter. Tell me your confidence meter on the group as a whole.
Confidence rating as a whole for wide receivers. There's a reason why I consider this the shallowest position for CFF this year, at least in terms of getting known commodities. Chris and I have the same top 8 wide receivers in the rankings. We'll get to those in a second. There's a reason why all those guys are in the top 8. I think there's top 8 is the same for pretty much everybody in CFF this year because they're the few known commodities that we have. After that, it's speculation after speculation. Guys have it's not even the same boards. Like Chris said, like every guy you point to, there's going to be some reason why you have that little voice of doubt in the back of your head of like, do I really need to take this guy? Hence why my strategy with wide receivers this year, a lot of times, is to grab what I consider a anchor wide receiver in those first 3 rounds. Sometimes I get lucky and maybe one falls to me in the 4th round. And then I don't want to say I punt the position, but man, I'm not chasing wide receivers after that point. I know the ADP. I know kind of when guys typically go. And if I see a guy kind of fall and I get an opportunity to get a share of a guy that maybe I haven't gotten a lot of, I'll take the shot then. But otherwise, I'm just letting the board fall to me at wide receivers this year because there's a lot of fun guys. There's a lot of guys with a ton of upside. But like I said, there is reason to have doubt with each and every one of these guys. And it makes it for a very fun position this year because very much is a place where you can have a lot of my guys.
Jared, one of the things I love about college fantasy football as the umbrella is the difference in strategy between CFF and C2C and even best ball, to be honest with you. But you mentioned speculation at the wide receiver position. How much does scheme play into assisting us with figuring out that speculation versus the talent of an individual player?
For me, it's pretty much the starting point for wide receivers for me every single year, right? It's not the end all be all, right? I've made that mistake in the past where, you can't ignore when a guy has talent. Like that's the age old question of like system versus talent, right? You got to have one or the other when it comes to having a wide receiver in your CFF rankings. If you got a guy that has neither, then quite frankly, they're just not worth drafting. There's too many guys that have either one or the other. In terms of, again, my strategy, it is a starting point. A lot of my projections are heavily based on volume, and volume comes from system at the end of the day. And it takes a lot for, offensive coordinators to kind of change up their system depending on a guy's talent, right? It happens, obviously. That's where surprise guys come out of
good offensive coordinators.
Yeah, good offensive coordinators will scheme their system to their talent, right? But not every offensive coordinator is made the same. And so, like I said, the volume is the starting point, and from there, I then have to evaluate, like, all right, yes, this is typically a good spot for CFF. Like maybe it's the slot wide receiver for, Ben Arbuckle, right? But then I have to ask myself the question of, okay, yes, the slot may be where I start and it probably stays in my rankings, but I really like this outside wide receiver better. Maybe there's a chance that they end up funneling the system towards him instead this year, as we saw with Kyle Williams just 2 years ago.
Chris, we know some schemes, Zach Kitley, slot wide receiver, Phil Longo, slot wide receiver, when he was both at UNC and Ole Miss. That was the spot we wanted to target. For a long time, Mike Gundy, I know he's not with Oklahoma State anymore, but for a long time, Mike Gundy had a track record with outside wide receiver ones. To what extent would you say that pie in your evaluation is split between the scheme and how talented that individual player is?
For me, it's like 60-40 talent to scheme, and it kind of shifts based on level. In power conferences, I'm gonna value that talent. Talent kind of dominates in that sense. I'm gonna trust the guy with the strong yards per route run, guys that can separate, guys who see a high target rate per route, yak. All these efficiency metrics is what I'm gonna base on, because those metrics are pretty much telling me how talented the wide receiver is going to be. In G6, that scheme gets closer to 45 to almost a 50-50 split, because those pass-heavy systems create cheap volume with screens and bubbles. So I get a little bit stricter on the efficiency metrics on the G6 side. But, talent is going to travel. That's why I'm quicker to trust the efficient power guy over the raw volume G6 player when my buckets tend to get a bit tighter. So for me, it's 65, 60, 40, 65, 35 in the power conferences. And then as we jump down to the G6, that split gets a little more even.
Now Jared mentioned. Oh, go ahead, Jared.
I would say I think it's interesting you brought up the difference between Power 4 and G5, because my initial thought on that is that both talent and system almost get magnified at the G5 level. You were saying that it's mostly system that gets magnified at the G5 level. I mean, G6 schools, especially now when guys transfer in and out, like guys that are talented and are truly above the level of competition at the G6 level are rarer than they used to be, right? These smaller schools, they understand that when they get a guy like that, they find that diamond in the rough that, all the big schools missed recruiting. They got to feature those guys, right? And so to me, that makes it to where the G5 level talent almost matters a little bit more than even the scheme, because like I said, they got to focus in on the guys that they get every once in a while, or only every once in a while.
Yeah, I can see that, but they're also trying to make the guy, right, with the talented player in the smaller situations. It's more of a big fish in a little pond, or where it's opposed to the other way, vice versa, when you go to the power conferences. So yeah, I could see where the talent might come into a little bit more effect for the G6 schools, but scheme for me, it almost brings it 50-50.
Chris, Jared mentioned a few coaches that he, looks for. Well, and Ben Arbuckle specifically,
Sure.
I'm thinking if Rich Rodriguez has a dual threat quarterback, if Lincoln Riley has a quarterback that we care about, anybody, are there any particular schemes that you're like, all right, let me go find this coach in this particular position and figure out who's going to win that position, and I need to make sure I have that player on my roster?
Yeah, it's the San Jose State slot wide receiver and Stutzman's offensive coordinator role there. I mean, we've seen it past 2 seasons. That slot wide receiver has put up a combined 327 targets. Going back to his time when he was a wide receiver coach and passing game coordinator with Texas State, the slot wide receiver still ended up on top. And even going back to his FCS days where he was the offensive coordinator at Utah Tech, Joey Holbert, again, the slot wide receiver, drew nearly 150 targets. So if we can identify who that might be this year, and it is really cloudy at the moment, there has been no standout for that slot wide receiver. A lot of the camp news has been mainly the outside targets that have come up as standouts throughout the process. But if we can identify, at least when you're drafting early, who that slot wide receiver is going to be, based on where ADP is telling us these guys are going, I mean, you have a potential wide receiver 1 that you're drafting as your wide receiver 8, 9, or 10. The one guy that was brought up early, and kudos to Josh Chevalier for bringing him up, was Jace Nix. But no one has really come out and taken over that role. A couple other guys that stood out, freshman wide receiver Carson Clark, who has been a standout, highly recruited wide receiver all through camp. But again, it's been mostly those outside wide receivers that have been the ones that have gained the most praise from coaches. So again, it's that slot wide receiver role for San Jose State for me.
And sometimes Stutzman doesn't even need a wide receiver, because he turned Nick Nash, who was a former quarterback, into a wide receiver 1. So
and he's doing
that again.
I was saying, he could be doing it again.
Yeah. Is it with who? Who's playing wide receiver now? Is
Emisone? Tama Emisone.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So how many? Well, we should. That's a question.
We're up to like 6. We're up to like 6 different guys that could be the wide receiver 1 for San Jose State this year. It's every time they come out with a new article covering that room, it feels like a new name's brought up, and I'm just like, I'm throwing my hands up, man.
Yeah.
Jared, I want to make sure I didn't steal your thunder. Are there any other schemes or coaches that you look to when you're saying, hey, I know that this position is going to be valuable?
I mean, we talked about the Kitley and Arbuckle slot wide receivers, but man, Sonny Dykes and those boundary wide receivers, man, can be so great. Even going back to his time at SMU, man, like when I first started playing CFF, that was probably the first system I really latched onto, was just those outside wide receivers at SMU, and that has now continued here into TCU the last couple of years. I mean, Jack Beck was awesome, and Stephen Williams was great, and then this past year, Eric McAllister, and now Jordan Dwyer this year, we all expect to do extremely well. I got him in my top 10 wide receivers for a good reason. 1, he's a pretty good wide receiver. And then 2, again, just got to go with the system.
Yeah. All right, let's without further ado, I feel like I want to have a little bit of music playing here in the background as we play this, because this is monumental stuff right here. Let's go with our top 15 in CFF. Here we go. Jeremiah Smith, Ohio State. Easton Messer at FAU. Malachi Toney at Miami. Bo Sparks at Texas State. Amari Thomas at Houston. Isaiah Sategna at Oklahoma. Speaking of Ben Arbuckle there, Jared. Wyatt Young at Oklahoma State. KJ Duff at Rutgers. Jordan Dwyer at TCU. Nick Marsh at Indiana. 2 Indiana wide receivers here in the top 15. Cam Coleman at Texas. Chris Dawn at Texas State. Tanook Hines at USC. Charlie Becker at Indiana. And Deuce Robinson at Florida State. Jared, what's your initial reaction when we see this top 15 in our CFF rankings?
I mean, like I said at the start of the show, that top 8 is the pretty much definitive top 8 for most everybody. Those are the 8 that you have to assume the least on coming into this year. And even then, like, especially once you even get into like Isaiah Sategna, Wyatt Young, KJ Duff, man, there starts to become questions so quickly. I really say the top 5 is pretty easily locked in. Like, if you can get one of those 5 guys, you're feeling really, really good. And speaking of one of those top 5 guys, it looks like we have a special guest here joining us, Felix. Should I stop my answer and we pivot to that, or you are muted, Felix?
Oh.
Easton, hopefully you can hear me. Easton,
yeah, I got you.
What's up, Easton? We appreciate you joining us. Of course, Easton Messer, our number 2 wide receiver, joins us here on the Campus to Canton CFF Receiver Ranking Summit. Easton, I got to start with this because I'm in Louisville, and I know you went to Cal. I went to a lot of Cal games when Milton was there. What's the biggest difference in lifestyle between Louisville/BG and Boca Raton?
I'll show you right here, my man. We got palm trees on the golf course. Living good. I love Louisville, though. 502, that's my city.
That's right. That's right. Now, I don't know if you knew this because college fantasy football is such a novelty, but we love Zach Kitley around here. What makes you such a good fit for this offense? And part 2 of that question, when he was recruiting you, did he say, hey, I have this wide receiver who almost went for 2,000 yards receiving in Jarrett Stearns, and you're going to play that role?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because Jarrett Stearns is actually the reason why I wanted to go to Western. We measure up at about the same. We have a lot of the same abilities. And then I think Coach Kitley loves how, like, reliable we can be, and he knows where we're going to be and make the right decisions.
Jared, Chris, don't let me take all the spotlight here. Were you aware, Easton, that fantasy football existed and that, we thought so highly of you?
So it's kind of funny because actually I didn't know about it until about last year. One of the people that worked in our training room was telling me about it and was telling me that I was doing pretty good last year.
Chris, Jared, what questions do you have for our wide receiver 2 overall, Mr. Messer?
Forgive me here. I'm a little starstruck right now. No, Mr. Messer, it's nice to meet you and everything. Where do I even go over here? I guess I'll just ask you. This is something I always like asking whenever I get to speak to like football players and everything. Obviously, football is your life, but what do you like to do outside of football?
Man, I like to golf. I'm on the course right now with some of my guys, quarterback Caden Beltcamp. But I like to golf. I like to go to the beach, chill, hang out with the guys, pretty simple. I'm a dude's dude, so all that stuff that we like to do.
Well, speaking of your guys, obviously this is a offense that can produce a ton in the passing game. You will benefit greatly from that. Any of your guys that are also in that receiving room you want to give a shout out to right now?
Yeah, we got a really good-looking kid in Kelby Valson coming over from Texas Tech, who he had a past relationship with Coach Kitley as well. He's going to be really good for us out there on the outside receiver. We got RJ Garcia, who's out on the course with me right now, coming over from Kansas State, and then Bowling Green. Tucker Holloway's one from Virginia Tech. So that's just to name a few, but we got a lot of weapons.
Wow, a lot of power forward guys. That's a lot of talent coming into that room right now. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, Easton, we had 104 receptions last year. Can you give me 110 and 10 touchdowns this year? Can I get double?
I hope so. The touchdown is really what I'm shooting for. 10 touchdowns for sure. The receptions, we'll see. I know some of those guys like Kelby and RJ might steal a few, but the touchdowns really what I'm looking for.
All right, he's number 8 in your programs, number 1 in your hearts. Easton, we appreciate you joining us. We wish you health and a lot of victories this year at Boca Raton.
Yes, sir. Appreciate y'all having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Messer.
Isn't that dope to have our number 2 wide receiver overall join the Campus to Canton CFF?
Dude, I never ever thought in my life that I would be interviewing one of the guys that like I speak so highly of. So this is awesome.
You just got to ask them. The kids love what it is that we're doing here. So let's do you think that let's talk about Easton Messer. Of course, he has that history with Jared. If you're just tuning in for the first time and you didn't pay attention in 2021 at Western Kentucky, there was a mass migration from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky. It's outside of 2019 LSU. This has been one of the most fun offensive seasons that we've seen, not just in like what's that, Conference USA, but in college football anywhere. Jarrett Stearns had a great season. I think Dawood Davis had a great season, and Bailey Zappi almost threw for 6,000 yards. Jarrett Stearns almost had 2,000 yards receiving.
You're forgetting about Mitchell Tinsley as well.
Mitchell Tinsley. They had like 4 guys.
It was insane. Malachi Corley. That was his first breakout year as well. Like it was just insane what they were doing.
Yeah. Can he get to 10 touchdowns this year? Or too much for a slot wide receiver?
I mean, I don't think the role really has anything to do with it. I think it's just opportunity. My projections have him currently set at 7 touchdowns. I was looking at the wrong guy there for a second. So 7 touchdowns. Again, just the pure volume, and hopefully the entire offense is improved from last year. You get a lot more scoring opportunities. I think that was the thing that was disappointing for CFFers last year was even Caden Veldkamp, I think, going through for 22, 23 touchdowns off the top of my head. Like the scoring opportunities just weren't there for Kitley's offense last year. If that improves, for a fact Messer is going to benefit from that.
Well, it was just a joy to have him on. And let's get back here to our top 15. Chris, I did not give you the opportunity to react to our top 15. What is your initial reaction to what we have here?
Charlie Becker's just too high. And we'll touch on that maybe a little bit later. But having the 2 Indiana wide receivers in the top 15, I believe it's only going to be Nick Marsh that makes his way into that fold of wide receivers. And then for the most part, again, the top end guys, Jeremiah Smith, Easton Messer, Malachi Tony, Bo Sparks, Amari Thomas, that's one giant bucket. I'd probably, if you want to take Malachi Tony first, or Jeremiah Smith, Easton Messer, or even at this point, Bo Sparks with the offense that they're rolling, I wouldn't be mad at it. So it's a decent group. Gets a little dicey after the top 15, but I like the top end talent, that's for sure.
Would you have, and Jared, I want to ask you this, speaking of Texas State, there's a situation where somebody could draft Brad Jackson, Bo Sparks, and Chris Dawn, all with relatively high draft picks. Would you be hesitant, or would you advocate for putting your eggs all in that one basket?
One is it's not speculation. I've actually seen somebody do it. It's not something that I personally would do, because I feel like when you're going for like a best ball draft, like ceiling's everything. And as great as the Texas State offense is, you are still going to cap your ceiling by having too many guys from the same system involved there, right? The goal with the best ball draft is trying to draft as many wide receiver ones as possible, because that's the ultimate ceiling, at least if you're trying, or really the number one guys of any offenses. And I don't blame people for pairing, Brad Jackson with a Bo Sparks or anything like that, because obviously then those touchdowns count for double. But, between Sparks and Dawn, like how many touchdowns can we realistically say the ceiling is between those two guys? Because in my projections, I've got Sparks at 8 touchdowns. I've got Chris Dawn at about 6.5 touchdowns. So you can maybe try to pitch the idea to me that they could both go above that, and they could still be very good wide receivers for CFF at that point. But wouldn't you rather go after another wide receiver who could end up getting, 9-10 touchdowns from his team, rather than getting a guy who's a wide receiver 2 on his team and probably is capped at about 6-7 touchdowns? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I mean, this is just going to be another team that's very fun to watch. Obviously, because we have a couple other players here in our top 15. Chris, I want to ask you about KJ Duff because if I'm new to college fantasy football, I'm like a Rutgers wide receiver here in the top 15, in the top 10 actually. 1,000-yard receiver, double-digit touchdowns. They lose his colleague or his teammate in Ian Strong Nickel. Is this just a case where all of the targets are going to go to the 6'6", 225-pound KJ Duff?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, that's what we're projecting, at least this early, for KJ Duff to be the number one wide receiver for Rutgers. Now it's going to come down to the quarterback play. You know, what are we going to get out of the starting quarterback for this team? Is he going to be able to put up the same kind of production that Kali Kamakis gave us last year? A situation where he was able to produce, you know, 2 CFF relevant wide receivers in that program. So I'm fully expecting KJ Duff to see a high amount of touchdowns, at least touchdown targets, red zone targets. And I think that's ultimately going to bring his value or his production up fantasy wise, and which is going to warrant the wide receiver 8 ranking here. So he should see, I don't know if he sees that 1,000-yard finish that he saw last year. He's going to get right up to that point. He's going to see the bulk of the targets. It's just really going to come down to the quality of target he's going to see in that offense. So I'm fully expecting him to be the wide receiver 1 for Rutgers. I'm expecting to see a high amount of targets, yardage, and touchdowns. I just don't know if he's going to reach that level that he saw last season.
May I also add, in addition to the fact that Duff is probably the only person left in that wide receiver room for Rutgers, I mean, they really didn't bring anybody else. I got 2 names for you guys, Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman. Kirk Soraka's produced some incredible CFF wide receivers in the Big Ten, no less. Like, this isn't like I'm pulling these guys from like his, like, you know, days back in like the MAC or something like that. He's been able to produce offenses that are successful in the Big Ten with talented wide receivers, both of whom ended up going off to the NFL, I might add. And so I fully believe he can do it again here, especially with KJ Duff being as efficient and great as he was last year.
We're fully expecting Lonergan to be the QB1.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. From Boston College. Oh, okay. So he didn't go.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe because I was like out last year, I'm like, I didn't realize Rutgers had 2, really highly thought of wide receivers. If I'm not mistaken, we're going to see Ian Strong's name here. I could be mistaken. I don't remember. All right, let's get here to the 15 through 30. We got Mario Craver at 16, Anthony Evans, Mississippi State at 17, David Amador at UTSA at 18, Andrew Marsh, a Michigan wide receiver at 19, Bryant Wesco at Clemson at number 20, Griffin Wilde at number 21, Sean Wilson at Delaware at number 22, Jacorian Moore, the second-year wide receiver. Can he stay healthy at Oregon? Ryan Coleman Williams, Mr. Dropsies himself at number 24, Poafili Ashlock at Hawaii at number 25, Braylon Staley at number 26, Jace Brown. I see Chris Batta still has on his LSU helmet there at number 20, or LSU hat, excuse me, at 27, Anthony Eager, I got it. What school is Anthony Eager at? It's not USC.
South Alabama.
South Alabama. And then Trey Richardson right here in Louisville at 29. And there we go. The former Rutgers wide receiver Ian Strong at Cal at number 30. Jared, what's your reaction when you see our 16 through 30 here?
I mean, still some guys I certainly like in this range. I'm a big fan of Anthony Evans. Obviously, he used to play for my Dogs, and then he went to Mississippi State where he reunited with Jeff Levy. He and Jeff Levy have had a good connection for a long time. Brennan Thompson is now gone there. They bring in some other guys into the Mississippi State wide receiver room, but given who Kamario Taylor is as a quarterback, I'm expecting a lot of targets to end up going Anthony Evans' way. He is very much a volume play for CFF. Some other guys some other guys in that range. Again, Bryant Wesco is a super talented guy there at 20. Obviously people are concerned about the Clemson offense this year, but they're not concerned about Brian Wesco's talent whatsoever. I am in the same boat. Going back to your initial question there, Felix, of, do we go system or do we go talent? I think Wesco is very much a talent play for a lot of people this year. And then, some interesting ones as we get further down, like once you get into that Jace Brown range through Ian Strong, that's when we start getting questions of, do we potentially not have the right guy here, right? Like Jace Brown, we all like at LSU, but there's other options there. Anthony Eager at South Alabama. Again, we assume he's the wide receiver one, but there's other guys that could pop up there. Trey Richardson. I know, Felix, you have some thoughts on that as well.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to mention 29 there. Yeah.
And then Ian Strong. I mean, I know Chris and I basically have two guys flipped in our rankings. Like our top Cal wide receiver is, in the 20-ish range for one of us. And then the other one's in like the 40-ish range, but we got two different guys.
Well, who are you higher on, Jared? Because for those who don't know, so Ian Strong, we project him to be, the outside wide receiver. And then Chase Hendricks transfers over from Ohio. And we more or less expect him to play the Jacob DeJesus role. So, Jared, who are you higher on amongst those two, even though Ian Strong is in our top 30 here?
So I'm the one who's higher on Ian Strong for sure. And it is, again, interesting because normally I'm a system guy. I would go after that slot, but I am a little worried about that jump from the MAC to the ACC here for Chase Hendricks. I trust him. I still think he'll do very well. Again, I do still have him in my, where do I have Chase Hendricks at? I have him as my wide receiver 42. So clearly I'm still pretty in on that. I think there's a chance that both of these guys could be productive for Cal this year, especially with JKS there at quarterback, but I'm really in on Ian Strong. I do not think Ian Strong leaves Rutgers after I can't remember if he hit 1,000 or near 1,000-yard campaign with the Scarlet Knights there to go somewhere where he's going to play second fiddle to someone else. He has the talent. I think that he'll be an NFL draft pick next year. And quite frankly, he just projects out better in my rankings compared to the two.
Thank you, Jared. We got John Lobb has joined the this is a star-studded CFF ranking show. We have Easton Messer, and now we have one of the true veterans and pioneers as far as bringing college fantasy football. John, I want to talk to you about the college fantasy football industry in general, but that might not be the right time right now. But what's your take on either your confidence or the strength of the wide receiver pool here in 2026?
You muted, Mr. Lobb.
That's 3 for 3.
Hey, Felix, man. First, let me say congratulations on getting Easton Messer. I thought that was great, man. We should do more of that as an entire industry. I agree, because college football with NIL and the direction it's going, it's about the players. And our game is about the players. Sure, the coaches matter. The systems matter. We all know that. But at the end of the day, I mean, at least I'm into the players. How do they perform on the field? So that it's great to see that young man on here and to be here with Jared and Chris at the same time. That's awesome. And Felix, you're back. It's about time. We missed you for a whole season. I was going to put out an APB on you. I didn't know where you were, brother. But to answer your question, the wide receiver, I think this is my 13th year doing rankings, 19th year playing college fantasy football. I think without question, I would say in that time period, it's the most volatile position by far. I mean, to project who's going to do well, we usually have this cohort of anyone from maybe 6 to 13, 14 players who we feel pretty confident about. But even that, they'll fall off sometimes. Offensive line falls apart, new system, coach, all of that. So I kind of now look at the wide receiver position a little differently. I want to take shots in my rankings. Once you get past like the number 32 wide receiver, I mean, can we say with clarity that wide receiver number 40 is definitely going to be better than wide receiver 50? I don't think so. I'll take my shots. And a lot of times I don't mind a third or fourth receiver on an explosive offense with a quarterback who I trust. Of course they can miss, right? We all miss at wide receiver at times, but the waiver wire is so important at this position. Look last year. If you got Wyatt Young and Skylar Bell off the waiver wire, you won. You made the playoffs.
Yeah.
If not won your league. Unfortunately, we had this guy, Caleb Williams, who really threw off the entire waiver wire and who won leagues because he just kicked so much butt for North Texas. But the wide receivers, I like to take some shots, and I'd rather take other positions earlier in the draft.
So, John, to your point, I have 20 wide receivers who I have projected out between 140 fantasy points and 160 fantasy points. That's 20 fantasy points difference. That's already crazy. How many do you think I have between 120 and 140?
I'm going to guess like 85 or something. 85 to 100.
It's 60, but it's still to the point of like after a certain point, just the average result that you can get from most of these wide receivers you're taking are relatively around the same range. So I agree with you, John. Your position, your mindset with the wide receiver position has to shift a little bit after that point. You got to take some higher upside shots and be willing to wait a little bit. Just kind of take them as they come to you. The difference in value of wide receivers you're getting in round 10, probably not that much different than what you're getting by round 20.
No, I heard you guys talking about KJ Duff even, right? Like we have him at number 5. I think he was a waiver wire that I can remember. I probably wrote him up in the first 3 weeks in our waiver wire column. I'm sure you did, Jared, also, and talked about him on your shows. And KJ Duff, for like 10 weeks, there was a spectacular wide receiver. And how many wide receivers did, if you were active in putting in your lineups, how many wide receivers did he replace in your starting lineup or in your flex position by week 3 or 4? And he was at Rutgers, right? Like no one was sitting there identifying, I want 2 Rutgers receivers in my fantasy lineup. But there was a good 6-7 weeks where both of them, Ian Strong and KJ Duff, were in your lineups.
All right, Chris, I want to give you the opportunity, because you have on the LSU hat, I want to give you the opportunity to react to our 15 through 30 here. And, John, I want to get your take also. But Jace Brown is here at 27.
Yep.
Give me your reaction to the list in general, but is that too high or too low on Jace Brown? He's a top – in C2C, he's a top 10 wide receiver for me.
Yeah, I mean – with the news coming out of spring, I've kind of pushed him back a little bit in my rankings, only because there has been no clear news or no clear report that's come out that said Jace Brown is going to be the guy heading into the season for LSU. It's kind of the same situation with San Jose State. There's been a different guy every week or every day who has stood out in practice. So I've seen reports with Jace Brown running with the 2s. So I don't know how much weight I want to put into that report. So for the most part, Jace Brown, out of all these wide receivers on between 16 and 30 here, Jace Brown might be the one, at least in this early process, that kind of falls out of the top 30 for me. So the rest of the wide receivers, I'm okay with where they're at. You know, Andrew Marsh from Michigan, yes. We're expecting a big uptick in at least touchdown usage
because of Jason Beck.
Yeah, because of Jason Beck and the system that they're bringing in. We touched on this on Chasing the Natty about just the third down conversion rate that was at Utah State that maybe Michigan wasn't able to accomplish last year, which will lead to more opportunities to the offense being on the field, which should see an uptick in the 3 touchdowns that Andrew Marsh got last year. So if he sees the continued usage, which most of his usage came at the back half of the season for the Wolverines last year, throughout a full season, an uptick in touchdowns, being the guy for Michigan. I mean, wide receiver 19, it might be the floor for Andrew Marsh. He could see a season where he puts up a top 12 finish.
Might I also add, the wide receiver 1 for Jason Beck the last 2 years has seen 90 plus targets in each of those last 2 years. You give that to a guy like Andrew Marsh, who was averaging 14 yards per catch last year. That's a pretty dang high ceiling.
Yep. Couldn't the number 1 wide receiver be JJ Buchanan, who comes over from Utah?
I don't think so, personally. I think that Buchanan's a good talent and everything. Don't get me wrong. But again, I was seeing something special with Marsh last year. Again, getting a true freshman wide receiver to produce at Michigan like we saw last year. I don't think we're going to see the Wolverines move away from him. I don't think he would have stuck around, quite frankly, through that coaching change if Marsh didn't believe that he wasn't going to get wide receiver 1 duties this next year.
John, any initial reactions or gut reactions to our 16 through 30 here?
Yeah, first, I'm in love with Andrew Marsh this year. I mean, I'm a Michigan guy. It's so exciting to even have a Michigan wide receiver talked about in the top 24. What's it been? Probably 7,
Not
8 years.
Braylon Edwards, something like
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. So I have Nick Marsh or Andrew Marsh at number 15 on my list. And I've been reading a little bit about Sharon Moore and the offense that he put together for the Wolverines over the last 2 years. And oh my God, is there some bad stories about his inability to coach the quarterback position and the wide receiver position? There's no doubt in my mind that Beck will unlock Bryce Underwood in this passing game. I expect Marsh to easily, Jared just mentioned it, average 90 receptions, 90 targets a year. I think Andrew Marsh gets that. He by far looked like the most talented Wolverine receiver in 6, 7 years, Felix, at least. I mean, it's not since Nico Collins, and they wasted that young man's talent, that's for sure. Michigan hasn't had a guy like this. Give me anyone with 90 targets. I mean, I'll take it. I think Bryce Underwood's going to take a step forward. The talent was there. You saw glimpses of it last year, but he didn't have good coaching, right? Look, coaching matters, especially with young men who are 18, 19. Bryce Underwood was a freshman last year, and he basically had no coach who could help him throughout the process. So I completely agree with that. Could you throw back up the list? Because I do have some others that I could comment on for you, but I forgot as my mind went blank here. I do like Ian Strong. I think he's very good. I mean, you're taking shots in the Cal wide receiver room. I would probably take the least expensive Cal wide receiver in the draft. It's just when I have two players who I like on a team, especially when I like their quarterback, I'll probably, depending on the draft, depending on how the board falls, I'm always comfortable taking whichever wide receiver is the second player off the board. But
do you believe the quarterback is transcendent like I do? I think the quarterback is transcendent. So I could, for that reason, buy the wide receivers there.
Yeah, see, I think he's very special. I want to see him one more year. I don't want to say he's very close. Can I say that? I was overly impressed with him when I watched him down the stretch. I think he has great arm talent. I do think he can unlock two wide receivers. I don't think they'll both go for 1,200 yards, but could each of them get over 850 yards, between 7 and 9 touchdowns? I do think so. And maybe he does unlock one of the two, goes crazy for like 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. I personally think it might be Ian Strong, but, we'll see reports as the summer go, and you just never know how injuries happen throughout the season. Another player that I like, and I took him, I've been doing a best ball draft with Jared all week. Thank you, Jared, for doing that. I like Braylon Staley out of Tennessee a lot. I get it. The quarterback position is a mess right now at Tennessee. And from what I've read, I don't think they even have a clear starter yet, right? Aren't they still jockeying through the spring who's going to play quarterback? But I was reading Staley, and he was talking about how it's the wide receiver's responsibility to help the young quarterback out. What that means, I think, is that these young men know that the whole offense is going to revolve around the wide receiver's ability to get open and make easy throws. Get those windows simple so that the quarterback at Tennessee can throw into those windows. I'm still going to believe in the Josh Heupel system, right? I think Staley's the best wide receiver on the roster. Maybe Mike Matthews is the one that you want to draft because he's coming. I think he's past number 200, right, in the ADP. So you could go with Mike Matthews too. So I do like Braylon Staley. Griffin Wild is fascinating. I'm really interested in him. I think he could have a very good season this year. I'm trying to think, where do I have Griffin Wild? Wow, I have him at 21. What do you have him? You have him at, you have him at 21 too.
We have 21 in my C2C rankings. He's a top 10 wide receiver. I think Griffin Wilde is severely underrated in generally.
I've got Wilde as a top 12 wide receiver.
Oh, there you go. I mean, I think he's someone who's super interesting. So I see if I could get 3 players in this 16 to 30 range, I would feel great about the way I built my wide receiver team, a room, and on a CFF roster.
I want to highlight here, Jared, you mentioned, let me get the list off. You mentioned my thoughts on Trey Richardson. What's the CFF community's take on that wide receiver core and productivity? Is it that we just trust Brom and it's either Trayshawn Hurry or Trey Richardson? Is that the word?
I think that those are the two that most people have kind of keyed in on. I know Volume Pigs likes the potential of LeMayne McCoy as well. It really is because that wide receiver room cleared out from this past
did.
year, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of vacated production. If we just had one guy come back from last year that we could really kind of key in on, that had a bit more production than what Trayshawn Hurry had last year. Because what did Trayshawn Hurry have? Like less than 100 yards last year. So again, not super productive in his first year for the Cardinals. Not that that's a kill shot or anything for his value, but then you look at a guy like Trey Richardson, who came up, played extremely well in the SEC last year, leaves that nice position there at Vanderbilt to go to Louisville. You have to imagine that there was some kind of pitch there saying like, hey, you're doing good at Vanderbilt over there, but have you seen what Brom can do with it when he makes you the wide receiver one for his team? Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna make you an NFL draft pick kind of deal. I think that's what people are focusing in on. And I find it interesting that even though Trey Richardson has missed a lot of spring, which is what made me drop him in my rankings a little bit, because otherwise he'd be a top 12 wide receiver for me. A lot of the beat report is still really keying in on him. Like Matthew McGavis, post spring game, specifically said in his article, when Trey Richardson returns, will absolutely be the wide receiver one. So I find it interesting that there does seem to kind of be still a consensus that he will be the guy, even though he's missed all of spring.
The question is it going to matter? Because as that quarterback room sits today, if 3 is your starting quarterback, if you're in the Discord, I've been reporting on spring camp at Louisville, all the open practices. If 3 is your starting quarterback, he will neutralize Trey Richardson, and Trey Richardson will not be able to maximize his value. If something changes in that wide receiver core, because Trey Richardson is a deep threat. Diego Pavia was back throwing it up to him. That is not going to happen if the quarterback room sits. It goes into the season as it sits today. If something changes, both Trayshawn Hurry and Trey Richardson could be unlocked. But I think specifically Richardson his value will be hurt the most if 3 is your starting quarterback going into the season. Those are my thoughts.
I mean, I buy that argument. And again, that's why we have Richardson down in the 30s now. Because like I said, if we felt good about this projection, he would be a top 12 wide receiver for us. I think 30 is right about that range where, again, you start picking the guys you really like to go after. And what did you start this whole show with, Felix? We go system, we go talent. That's one of the most bankable positions in CFF is that Brom wide receiver one. And people are going to be willing to take shots on that no matter what the situation is. Because quite frankly, Lincoln Kienholz, I believe you, because again, you've had eyes on him. I feel like we've dealt with some worse quarterbacks at Purdue and Louisville over the years with Jeff Brom. Right?
But you know what? They played a ton. If you look at what Jeff Brom does, the quarterbacks that he bring in, regardless of their talent level, they played a ton of football. Jack Plummer, Tyler Shuck was a 5-year starter, started at both Texas Tech and Oregon, and then Miller Moss, who was also an older player. That's the difference between Lincoln Kienholz and those 3 that he's had previously, is that Lincoln Kienholz has no experience. Those guys, as mid as they might be, they had a ton of experience. And the guy behind Kienholz has started, 2 or 3 seasons at West Georgia. So that's a big difference between Kienholz and the other guys. John, any parting shots here about CFF or the wide receivers here in our top 30?
No, I mean, I think this is amazing to do it this early. What a perfect week. I'm so happy that you invited me on, Felix. This is just a great way to whet our appetites. You know, I like Trey Richardson at Vanderbilt. I thought he was spectacular, but you are right. If the quarterback can't find him deep, it doesn't do us any good in fantasy. So that's something I'm going to have to watch. Look at the Louisville quarterbacks. Is number 3 going to start? You just kind of, I got to find out if 3 is starting. I might have to lower him on the rankings. But based on his talent, what I saw at Vanderbilt, I think he's a very good deep threat at the college level.
John, thank you. It's so great to have one of the elder statesmen in the CFF community. We appreciate your time today, man. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Have a great night, gentlemen.
All right, sir. All right, guys. We are pounding the table now for a player. Pounding the table. Do you guys remember where that expression comes from? Well, I mean, it's just a general expression, but the story was that Kyle Shanahan, when he was with I forgot, where was he with Arizona? I can't remember where Kyle Shanahan was.
Commanders?
But the word
Falcons at one point.
Well, the word was that he pounded the table for Utah running back Joe Williams for them to draft Joe Williams. That was 2016. They did draft Joe Williams. Joe Williams never really did a whole lot in the NFL. But the guys that you guys highlight are going to have smash seasons here in 2026. So, Jared, pound the table for somebody.
Again, this was odd because I was looking through my rankings and there weren't like a ton of guys that I was like that much higher on compared to everyone else, which is really weird. I got a ton of guys that I'm so much lower on, which we'll discuss here in a bit. But so I had to dig a little bit deeper, and I'll go with two guys that I'm going to advocate for their upside, and they are absolutely guys that are worth taking shots on. And Felix, you're going to love one of these because I know you love this guy pretty much since he came out of high school. But I'll advocate for Troy O'Mary this year. Obviously has not worked out at all last 4 years for Troy O'Mary. And that whole meme of like, oh, these people, they somehow delude themselves into thinking that'll work for them. But for us, it could work for us. I like his spot here at New Mexico. Jason Eck, not Jason Beck. That's the Michigan offensive coordinator, but Jason Eck, the head coach at New Mexico, has put together some really, really solid wide receiver ones over the last couple of years. His time at Idaho was just absolutely monstrous of what he was able to put up there. I mean, was this Hayden Hatton, 131 targets in 13 games, 1,235 yards. He's outside 9 touchdowns. Year after that, our guy, Jordan Dwyer, who's now at TCU, but when he was back at Idaho, 135 targets, 1,204 yards, 12 touchdowns. His outside wide receivers continue to produce. And even last year, in that first year at New Mexico, with so much going wrong for the Lobos last year and struggling, their top wide receiver, Keegan Johnson, still had 93 targets, right? Didn't have a lot of touchdowns. I'm expecting that to benefit or to improve this year. And Troy O'Mary in that wide receiver room is easily the best talent that they have. He's going to play on the outside. And when Troy O'Mary's been healthy, he can put together some really, really solid production. He's a good player. Yeah. And so I think, going back to what we were talking about at the start of the show, this is one of those scenarios where I think his talent is going to be that much higher than the rest of the Mountain West, a more depleted Mountain West than ever, because so many of the great players of the Mountain West move up in competition afterwards. So there's less talent to go around in that conference. I think there's a chance that Troy O'Mary could absolutely explode. I just grabbed him in the 30th round of a CFF draft. Quite frankly, it's hard for me to leave a draft without taking a shot on him because, man, the upside's just too great.
Do you know the victory lapping that I would do if Troy O'Mary, came and put up a monstrous final season? I'm already tough to deal with.
It would be well deserved, my friend.
I think Michael Penix Jr. was a huge victory lap. Jahmyr Gibbs was a huge victory lap. If I get a monster season from Troy O'Mary, you people will not hear the end of it. All right, Chris, give me a pound the table for a player. I love Jared. You can't. I don't know if you can top Jared's. Jared is playing to the home crowd here.
Troy O'Mary, great Toronto Raptor, once said, "It's over. It's not happening for Troy O'Mary. At least not for me. As high as you guys want to be on Troy, it's just not going to happen for me. But I will pound the table on Reed Harris being the wide receiver one for
that's another Felix favorite. This isn't fair.
You just got to know your audience. Over Amarian Miller, at least as a weekly fantasy asset. That's how I'm going to have it. Amarian Miller will give you games where he puts up a big number, but it'll be Reed Harris that ends up seeing the most targets, and more importantly, more targets in the red zone and into the end zone. Last year, looking at the ASU quarterbacks, Jeff Sims and Sam Levitt, they were bottom half in the league in time to throw, charted by PFF, and ASU hasn't done big things to shore up that offensive line. So how much time is Cutter Boley going to have in that pocket? How much time is he going to have in order for the play to develop for Amarian Miller to supersede Reed Harris in this wide receiver room? And I just don't think it's going to be a lot. Looking deeper into Cutter Boley as a quarterback at Kentucky last year, he was most efficient attacking the field in those short to intermediate parts. And that's where Reed Harris soaked up a lot of his volume at Boston College. That's where he made his money as an Eagle last season and the season before that. And if you're looking at passes over 20 yards for Cutter Boley last year, 42 attempts and only 8 completions. So he wasn't overly efficient at stretching the field. And if Amari Miller is going to be that speedy go route, big play wide receiver, is going to be a lot of misses more than there's going to be a lot of hits for him. And Reed Harris is just going to be the guy that soaks up those easy targets. He's going to be that outlet wide receiver for Cutter Boley, who we're presuming to be the quarterback 1 for Arizona State. The target share, if ASU runs the same kind of offense that they run last year, between, again, both quarterbacks, Levitt and Sims, 34.5% was in those short to intermediate parts of the field. And I'm expecting the same type of output to happen at ASU. And that's going to leave the door wide open for Reed Harris to finish as the wide receiver 1 in this room.
I'm going to disagree slightly here. And this is one of this, again, I talked about earlier how there's a lot of rooms where, Chris and I especially, where we just have different guys, right? I got Amari Miller ahead of Reed Harris right now. And here's the thing I won't deny. Reed Harris has had all the buzz this spring. And that is entirely fair. And I moved him up my rankings because of it. And I don't blame anybody for moving him ahead of Amari Miller, considering that Amari Miller's had some buzz, but not nearly the buzz that Reed Harris is getting. It feels like every day they put out a practice report, Reed Harris's name is being mentioned. I totally get that. I've drafted now a couple shares of Reed Harris because I really do think the upside is great there. If you're in a draft, take the second of whichever wide receiver is coming off the board here. Because one, neither of these guys is going to get the volume that Jordan Tyson got last year. Arizona State doesn't want that, right? Because they saw last year how much that limited their offense when they were trying to just rely on one guy. And it wasn't any good for the wide receiver 1 either. Because, Tyson was great. But even as we went down the stretch, his production was falling off more and more and more as defenses knew they could just bracket him with 2 or 3 guys and they didn't have to worry about anybody else. Chris, you talk about the fact that Reed Harris, or you talk about how Cutter Boley needs those shorter targets, right? Those lower ADOT targets. Who had more targets or a higher percentage of their targets 20 plus yards down the field last year, Reed Harris or Amari Miller?
I'm going to say Reed Harris because he was targeted as well.
He had over 40% of his targets last year were 20 yards plus down the field. Meanwhile, Amari Miller, similar boat, but 30%, right? He has more, doing math in my head, about 60% of his targets come between 0 and 20 yards down the field. Meanwhile, Reed Harris looking at about, 45%, right? The other thing I want to point out, if we're going to be targeting short, right, and that's what this offense is going to rely on, we're going to need yards after catch. Who has the higher career yards after catch per reception?
This is a good question.
Between Amari and Miller or Reed Harris.
I think it's Miller. I think
it is Miller. He's got Reed Harris beat by about 2 yards after catch per reception. So,
I don't think I've ever seen Reed Harris run after the catch ever, to be honest with you. And I because I like him, I've watched him a lot.
So again, I'm not saying that this is going to be wrong at the end of the day, right? Again, I get the hype behind Reed Harris. I'm drafting shares of Reed Harris because I think there's a legitimate shot he is the wide receiver 1 for Arizona State this upcoming year. I'm just saying don't count out Amari Miller because I actually do think he fits really well what Arizona State wants to do. And quite frankly, I don't think they pull him from Colorado if they didn't sell him on the idea that he could be a wide receiver 1 for them.
Yeah, definitely not counting Amari Miller out. Don't get me wrong with that. I just feel
you got him outside the top 50 wide receivers. I'd say that's counting him out pretty well.
That's fair. But in this offense and how they're going to run now, does the fact that a bulk of Reed Harris's targets also came above the 20-yard line, does that open up more opportunity for him, as well as the short to intermediate parts of the field? It's going to open up more scheming for him to be a deeper target as well. Will that produce more targets for him as opposed to Amari Miller maybe just being that one type of wide receiver for Arizona State?
Well, they both can do that, right? Again, like both of them had 30 plus targets or 30% plus targets 20 yards down the field. Like they're both deep threat guys. They both can stretch the field, right? Arizona State, that's what Arizona State is so excited about here, is that they don't just have one guy that they can tell, hey, go straight and go, right? They got two guys that they can tell go straight, and then all Cutter Boley has to do is sit back and be like, all right, who beat their guy, Reed Harris or Amari Miller? All right, I'm going to throw them the ball, right? So I think it could very well be that this is a back and forth situation all year long. It could end up being that both of these guys end up in like the 700-800 yard range because, it just depends on the week who is able to be covered and not. So
let me give you guys something that I think you may or may not. Actually, I'll just tell me if you agree with this. Arizona State, Colorado, Florida, best wide receiver cores in the country, 1 through 3.
I would disagree with Colorado, especially if the guys aren't healthy, right? If you're giving me a healthy Joseph Williams and
Joseph Williams, Danny Scudero, Cam Perry, Ernest Campbell, and DeAndre Moore. That's the 1 through 5 on that one.
I'm still not buying that as one of the best wide receiver cores in the country. Florida is one that legitimately scares me. I mean, Singleton, if a healthy Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown is going to be scary. And then you got Micah Mays, who you can just move wherever you need to. If one of those guys were to go down, Florida's got a legit scary wide receiver room. And then Arizona State
is right up there with you got two trees on the outside in Reed Harris and Amari Miller and Raiden Vine Bright over in the slot.
I would say Colorado's a distant third between these three, but Florida and Arizona State are legit wide receiver rooms.
Okay. All right. Some individual rankings here. Did we go over the Charlie Becker? Chris, you have him at 25. Jared has him at 9. Fight.
Another situation where, again, I don't blame anybody for really going after either one here. One, we've seen the past 2 years that at Indiana specifically, they can produce two wide receivers. This was just an offense the last couple of years that has just been scoring enough, putting enough touchdowns up that it really doesn't matter if you pick the right guy, quote unquote, in terms of being the wide receiver one. They're scoring enough to where you're feeling fine regardless. I think the reason why I lean towards Becker is twofold, right? One, he's been in the system already for a year. And last year he was hyper efficient, right? Like, again, a deep threat target for them, very, very efficient for them. I had my eye on him the moment that both Amari Cooper and Elijah Surratt were leaving. I'm like, now Becker is going to be one of their main guys next year. Now they do bring in Nick Marsh. Nick Marsh is legit. I've got him in my top 20 wide receivers for a good reason as well. I think there's a decent chance that either one of them could end up being a top 10 wide receiver for CFF by the end of the year. But my issue with Nick Nash, and you can blame the fact that, you can blame the fact he's at Michigan State for 2 years, right? Not a super high scoring offense and stuff like that. But in terms of just general efficiency, I've had to fudge his numbers quite a bit in order to get him up to where I can consider him a top 20 wide receiver. Because in my brain, I don't feel like he is a talented guy. He should be a top 20 wide receiver. But my projections, I've had to fudge things around a little bit to get him up there. I took his best year from Michigan State, and that's the only year I counted. Usually I'm taking 2 or 3 years of production and putting it in there. But because last year was just such a rough year for Michigan State, I'm like, okay, maybe I don't count that, right? And it took that to get him into my top 20 wide receivers. I don't have to do that at all with Charlie Becker here. So that's, I think, kind of the difference maker between those two. So Chris, you're free to push against me here.
Yeah, for me, I'm just not ready to trust a player in Charlie Becker who was really only became efficient when Elijah Surratt missed games. In week 11 and 12, Elijah Surratt was not on the field. Those are really the only 2 games where Charlie Becker, who was playing with his roommate, really came out and put something on paper. In the game where Elijah Surratt came back in that week 14 game, 5 targets, 1 reception, 6 yards. Doesn't really scream too much efficiency for me, at least, where a player like Nick Marsh, who I'm fully expecting to enter Indiana in that Elijah Surratt role, who's put production on papers, put it on tape, who's had multiple games.
Charlie Becker also had a big game in the Ohio State game, the playoff game.
He did. I'll give him that. So 3 big games over 2 seasons of 10 plus games in each season where we've seen Nick Marsh be able to do something where Charlie Becker just had to wait for his turn. Granted, when he was on the field, like you said, he was efficient. He was He was given the opportunity to succeed and shine. I'm just not ready to put a guy who's had 3 games of production over a guy who's given me 2 decent, now I wouldn't say elite or I wouldn't say solid production seasons at Michigan State, but 2 decent seasons where I can see the production coming for him at Indiana in this offense. So I fully have Nick Marsh. I think Nick Marsh is going to come in and be that Surratt role, which I think will hurt Charlie Becker because if he's either, the secondary outside wide receiver, he's not really going to play the slot role. He's not going to soak up the role that Omar Cooper left. That's really going to hurt his production going into the season. So for me, Nick Marsh is going to be the guy.
Could this be a situation where, just like Cal, you draft the cheaper of the 2 options? Once you see one go off because targets should be concentrated between these 2, between Becker and Marsh. So just like Hendricks and Strong in California, could this be a situation where you just take the cheaper of the 2 options? Once you see one go off the board, okay, then you can start considering taking the other.
Hence why I have a lot of Charlie Becker shares. He's usually the second one coming off the board in drafts. And again, I like I said, similar to with the Arizona State situation, I've drafted a couple shares of Nick Marsh as well because I have Becker rated higher. That doesn't mean I'm wholly keying in on like, oh, he is the only guy. This is one of the few wide receiver rooms where I legit think that both of these guys could end up being top 30, top 24 wide receivers for CFF. You know why? Because I just saw Indiana do it last year with Cooper and Surratt.
But 2 different positional receivers, right? The slot wide receiver and Omar Cooper and the outside guy and Nick Marsh.
Yes, but this is the point. I can't remember where I made this recently, but sometimes you got to pay attention to quarterback tendencies as well, right? They bring in Josh Hoover from TCU, and look who Josh Hoover's been throwing to the last couple of years, right? This past year, who were the top 2 wide receivers for TCU? Eric McAllister, Jordan Dwyer. Where do they play? Both the outside guys. Before that, who are the top 2 wide receivers for TCU? Jack Beck, Savion Williams. Where do those 2 guys play? 2 outside positions. That's where Josh Hoover is going to be targeting. The slot wide receiver may not be as productive for Indiana this year just because of where Josh Hoover is going to be looking.
But who's going to be the slot wide? It's not one of these 2. Both of these guys are going to be out.
No,
you're going to have one at X and one at flanker.
God, who was the guy that you brought up recently on the show, Chris? I legitimately just forgot his name because I don't believe in him at all.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Jared, I'm looking at your notes here on the show sheet. Were there any other, do you have one maybe positional discrepancy that you want to bring up now?
Let's talk TJ Moore. I think that's an interesting one because especially for this audience, right? Like TJ Moore, Felix, where do you have him in your C2C rankings? Because I don't blame you for having him like a top 15 wide receiver.
Yeah, he's definitely top 15. He might be top 10. I've liked TJ Moore since he was a freshman also.
Talent is through the roof. I think we overestimate the value of a Clemson wide receiver too, right? I'm fully bought in on the idea that Brian Wesco will be the wide receiver 1 for Clemson, assuming health, which again, by all accounts, it sounds like he is well on his way to being back to being healthy by the time the start of the season. And quite frankly, any concern you might have for Wesco pretty much also applies to TJ Moore as well with regards to the system, right? Like Chris Vizina, Chris, we're on the same page. That's a quarterback that we're very concerned about potentially tanking this entire Clemson offense. It makes me question the fact that I have Bryant Wesco as high as I do. Where do I have Wesco at? The wide receiver 13. So very much concerned about that. And again, a lot of that has to do with Wesco being hyper efficient, 17.3 yards per catch over the last couple of years, and a near 10% touchdown rate on the targets that he's able to do. These are just not numbers that TJ Moore is able to replicate. So if you're going to ask me which guy I go for, I'm definitely going to go for Wesco. And because I have TJ Moore locked in as that wide receiver 2 for Clemson, that throws him way, way down my rankings. Let's see, where do I have him at? I have wide receiver 102, and I've got him projected for about 70 targets. So it's not like I think he drops off a cliff, but that still only projects out to about 673 yards and about 4 touchdowns for him. Or
listen,
no,
I want TJ Moore to have the 900-yard, 8 touchdown season because I've got a lot of him rostered in a lot of places. So, Chris, what's your rebuttal to Jared on TJ Moore?
I don't have a big rebuttal on this situation. I got Wesco as the wide receiver 1 for Clemson. I'm a little aggressive on TJ Moore just because, like you, Felix, I like the talent that he possesses. But Jared nailed it. It's going to come down to the QB play and how much of the QB production is going to be able to produce 2 valid college fantasy wide receivers. When I saw the show sheet and I saw what Jared shared there was 2 wide receivers where I was really second guessing where I had them ranked based on where Jared had them ranked. And it was TJ Moore and Victor Snow. The other guys I was kind of comfortable with where I had, Eric Singleton and Nick McMillan, but it was really those 2 wide receivers. One, TJ Moore, because the quarterback situation, I just don't trust Vizina in that backfield. And then Victor Snow with the news, the constant drumbeat for Josiah Trader in that situation, who we're expecting, I guess, now to be the wide receiver 1, even though Victor Snow was very productive at Buffalo. But going back to TJ Moore and where I have him ranked, I have him ranked wide receiver 39.
Is Josiah Trader said to be the slot wide receiver, or is it gonna be Snow?
So Trader's going to be outside. Last I checked, I actually had this saved. Did I close it out? I had a 247 article that I believe said that they expect him to be the starting slot, but they, like the beat reporter themselves, I wish I had it still pulled up, but they basically questioned the idea that he could handle a heavy volume. He's a small guy, 5'8", 170 pounds.
They questioned whether Victor's interesting. Okay.
But at least he'll handle a heavier volume at the ACC level, right? It's different than doing so at Buffalo, right?
Okay.
And then they were kind of pointing out that there are some other guys that seem to be kind of emerging, including Josiah. Is it Josiah?
Jojo Trader.
Yeah, you're right. I could just go with Jojo, including Jojo Trader, and there's a couple other names that he pointed out. Let me see if I can find that article real quick.
I thought that they had a season-ending injury in that wide receiver room, which is why I went.
Not a season-ending injury. It was a legal thing.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been fun. Let us know your thoughts about this. The CFF. The condition or the state of the wide receiver pool in college fantasy football in the comments in the chat. Tune in for the rest of Campus to Canton week. We've got one more show today at 8, starting in about an hour, the freshman class show. I'm tired. I need a little bit of a break. Like the video. If you're a new subscriber and you want to try Campus to Canton, go ahead. You can join for $1 for a year. That's a ridiculous deal. Thank you to Jared. Thank you to Chris. Thank you to John Lobb. Thank you to Easton Messer for joining us. And thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you. See you at 8. Peace.